Hello, and welcome to another episode of Tactical Startup. This week, we are going to be speaking with Chelsea Williams. She is a friend of mine from Facebook, and we've had many opportunities to get to know each other. And she is an outstanding person. I highly recommend her. And I gotta love it when my tech does the thing that it's not supposed to do. So let me pop that on. Anyway, to give you a little bit of heads up about what she has 12 plus years of managing money for entrepreneurs, 7.5 years in business for herself. She made $100,000 in her first year. She's top 100 in finance of 2020, multiple marquee Who's Who publications. She's also a fractional CFO for high achieving entrepreneurs. Let's welcome Chelsea on to Tactical Startup. Lovely. My video didn't. Oh, goodness. New computer, new hiccups. We'll just go with this for now. My buttons aren't working. What the heck? They were literally working 2 seconds ago. You're listening to Tactical Startup, a podcast dedicated to building amazing businesses. I am your host, Taylor Darcy. In this podcast, we explore ways to innovate, improve, and level up your business through sales, marketing, automation, and business planning. Successful businesses pivot when times are bad and stay the course when times are good. We will have guests from different walks of life to help you see that success is not only possible, but even probable, no matter when or where you start. Through hard work and strategic planning, you can have the entrepreneurial life you've always dreamed. Tune in weekly to level up your business. Chelsea, welcome.
Hey, there we are.
Yeah, I know, right? Like it wouldn't be a true beginning of something if there wasn't some technical glitch, right?
That's
So
exactly right.
it is what it is, right? You can't, especially in the Zoom age and technical age, there's not much you can. So apparently the video was buffering, and so that's why, and it didn't switch over to that until I was done. So how are you? How is your day going?
I am doing good. I'm in the Midwest, and so we always complain about our winters and how long it takes summer to get here, but the weather is gorgeous. So,
Nice.
I mean, first world problems if I was to complain. So, I'm just going to be grateful.
You know what? That's good. That's good. I live in San Diego, so I literally cannot complain about the weather, no matter what time of season it is.
Nope.
It's just beautiful, and it's not always 75. Just for the record, it does get hot here occasionally, and it does get cold here. But it's definitely more temperate than most climates in the
What does that
United
mean? Like
States.
77 to 72? Like,
No. It can get up into the 90s and hundreds. It is possible. Closer to the
Mhm.
coast is cooler than inland. So I live just a smidge inland, even though my zip code is technically San Diego, but I live enough inland that my rent isn't absurd, which, I mean, that's not saying much these days because it's still absurd. But anyway. So thank you so much for coming on here. I wanted one of the things that my listeners struggle with is finances. And I've had a couple of other guests that have done similar, but not the same, things that you do. And we've talked about me actually reviewing some of your coursework that you have. How's that going, by the way?
Yeah, it's going good. We are making it better and teaching people how to be CFOs of their business and life, which is not something we're taught in school. So that's where a lot of my passion comes in.
Yeah, that's so true. Like, I mean, even in like I have an MBA in financial management, and so by far more average than the most. But in the entrepreneur world, there's a lot of like DIY, which is fine. But there comes a point when DIY is not your best option. So, would you mind expanding on that when it would be important to bring in someone like yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I'm not a person for cookie cutter solutions, right? Like, not every financial management system is going to work for the size or your personality type or how you best manage your finances. And so I think it's really important to assess what your goals are. What are you trying to accomplish? At what point are you going to feel comfortable? What are you actually signing up for? Because I talk
Right.
to a lot of people who I call them bookkeeper hoppers. They're hopping from bookkeeper to bookkeeper to bookkeeper because the truth is they don't understand what they're supposed to expect, and they're not taking the time and patience to build a relationship to figure that out. And so I think it's important for people to understand, like, who are your key financial players, number one, and at what point do you start to bring those people into your business to help you? Because your bookkeeper is not a CFO, probably. Your bookkeeper probably doesn't prepare tax returns or do retirement investing for you either. And so I think it's important to know those things. And as far as the when, that kind of depends, right? Like, there's no cookie cutter. If you have 20 hours a month that you want to devote to getting QuickBooks certified or taking a bookkeeping class and working on developing another craft, then good for you, as long as you do it right, because garbage in, garbage out,
Right.
right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Um, but really, it's when the budget calls for it, which, again, perspective being a business owner is everything, right? And
Right.
so something like getting clarity around your finances and around your numbers, that is not an expense, that is an investment in yourself and in your financial clarity.
Yeah, I think that brings some very valid point. Having an investment as opposed to like people, a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of business owners like look at it as what is it going to cost me, right? But what they're not putting into effect or what they're not thinking about is what are they going to get out of it, right? It's not just about the numbers. It's, as you mentioned, it's clarity about where you're headed, where you are, where you're headed, and certainly being able to identify areas of weakness, areas of strength, and being able to work on those areas of weakness, and working and making sure that your areas of strength don't become liabilities. And your numbers are some of the most important thing that you'll do. And yet a lot of entrepreneurs don't, right? Like they just fly by the seat of their pants. And which there's a weird, because I'm in a lot of entrepreneur groups and I'm sure you are too. There's this weird, oh, I don't know how to explain it, but there's this weird mentality that goes with a lot of entrepreneurs that are like shunning traditional, accounting and bookkeeping and even lawyers, right? Like they're like, I can do it on myself. It's okay. And so what are some pitfalls that you see when with that ideological mindset that is very prevalent in the entrepreneur world?
One of my favorite books, I have different books and I call them my business Bibles, is the E-Myth. And the E-Myth talks about that exact same thinking of, well, I'll just do it myself. I'll just do it myself. And I think that what we have to recognize as entrepreneurs is that you are successful because you put people and position yourself around people that know more than you do in other areas. Like, you stay in your zone of expertise
Right.
and you operate as much as you can in your zone of expert, and you allow people to come in and be your team and start building something that you couldn't have built alone. And so I think, by having that mindset of, oh, I'll just do it myself and all of those things, you're really limiting yourself, right? Like, we create and shatter our own glass ceilings.
Right.
And so I think that's a mindset that can be very limiting.
Yeah, and I've noticed that when people that are doing that are very not just limited in mindset, but they're limited in their ability to expand, right? Like they limit their own opportunities for success because they don't see the value of somebody else doing the work that they're good at, right? Like economies of scale, right? You don't get there by doing everything yourself because you're not good at everything. You're good at something, right? You're good at being the visionary. You're good at implementation. Whatever it is that you're good at that. But the expectation is you can't be good at everything. And now in the beginning, like, right, like that's when you are truly proof of concept and you don't have a ton of money, right, then yeah, maybe you have to do some DIY and that's to be expected, right? But the bigger you get and the bigger you hope to get, you should be implementing, legal strategies. You should be implementing finance strategies, bookkeeping strategies, things that will help your business grow that you wouldn't otherwise get. Tell me about what type of process that you go through when you sit down with a new entrepreneur or an entrepreneur that's been in business for a little while. Let's talk about them. And what is it that you look at, and what is it that you do?
Yeah. So when I first start working with somebody, like there's like three phases of business, right? There's the startup phase, there's the let's get the financial foundations set. And then there's the let's start getting financial anticipation and move into some of those more proactive pieces. And people can come to us in a number of different situations. So a lot of people, because of the nature of the work or they're DIY and doing it wrong, need a lot of correction work or historical compilation work. And so, we want to get you to this place to where you have a financial foundation. And the processes around that are those month in really boring accounting tasks that I won't go into because I don't want your audience to fall asleep. But what you need to get to, like that financial foundation place, is defined by getting monthly financials. You're getting those monthly reports that show you in black and white where your numbers are.
Right.
But I think there's a disconnect. And this is, again, not knowing what to expect or not knowing what your options are or not having the right people on your team. Just because you get financial reports every month doesn't mean that you are proactively managing your finances, right? It means
Right.
that your foundation is there, but we need to start building on that and doing things that allow you to see into the future and be able to anticipate what's going to happen with your money and put different things in place, different tools to manage it physically and on a financial report.
So, what are some of those tools that you use to manage money specifically?
Well, my favorite, have you ever heard of Profit First?
I have actually. Yep.
My favorite is Profit First.
Okay.
And I really love the system because part of why I love it, and I don't stick to it. Again, I'm not a cookie cutter person. So I'm not like Profit First certified. I don't go buy their systems, right in line with what they do. I believe in flexibility, but the number one reason why I like it is because it's working in a way that we are already working in. Like, it's our human nature. What most people do is they log into their banking app on their phone and they're looking at their one account going, okay, well, I have this much money in there. I think that I'm getting paid this much money this week and this much is going out. So I think I'm good. Like, we're already logging in and looking at these account balances, right? So
Right.
Profit First really just layers on that really nicely and works well. So that's
Okay.
one of the things that we do.
So, tell me, like, when you sit down and you say to someone, what is it the financial reports? Because here's another issue is like, right, when you look at a P&L or a balance sheet or that type of thing, it can be like, I don't understand what this means. Right? So do you
Yes.
educate people, or do you send them somewhere to educate them, or do you have a type of course that you recommend for people that, QuickBooks can do a lot, right? Like, I mean, you can do quite a bit of stuff in QuickBooks without a ton of knowledge in accounting. But my question is that how do they understand what they're looking at? Because it just looks like a big piece of paper with numbers on it, right? Most people look at it and their eyes gloss over and they're like, nah, I don't want to deal with this. So what do you do?
Yeah, no, and we get that a lot. And that's kind of like when we bring on a new client, the first thing I'll do is evaluate their chart of accounts. And the chart of accounts is just a term that references how your financials are presented to you.
Hmm.
So, for example, if your income statement says sales and that's it, that's not very helpful. It's a great number to know, but what would be even more helpful is if you had a chart of accounts that wasn't just sales. It
Right,
was sales from A, sales from B, sales from C, so that we could know how much each different thing that you offer or sell contributes to your top line number, right?
right,
I think a lot of the confusion comes in is because people aren't getting involved with their financial statements. They're not voicing their confusion. They're not voicing their concern. They're not voicing their questions to their bookkeepers, to their accountants, so that their accountants and bookkeepers can really customize their reports in a way that makes sense to them. If you have multiple locations, you should see your revenue and expenses by location at some point, right? if
right,
you if you have things mapped out and your expenses grouped, like marketing is one that we're very adamant about separating, because marketing can be a black hole for your money.
yeah,
And there are a lot of important metrics in there. Like, you need to know what works, not just kind of shove money out the door and not monitor it, right? And so
Right.
your chart of accounts can really help you do that. And when you can get involved with your financials and ask questions and feel comfortable communicating with the person that you're working with to be like, I don't understand what this is saying, or what are my margins, or how do I calculate that? That's where the key is, I think. So being involved is the first step to making sense of the
Right.
financials. Like you should be able to read it and say, oh, these are all my marketing expenses. And it's because I spent 1,000 with Avo, 2,000 with Google ads, and 1,000 with Facebook paid ads. And here's my leads from each source, and it's worth it or it's not.
Right. So it's really about, and I call it this spray and pray approach, right? When people are just like, here, I'm sinking money into my marketing and I have no idea if it's actually working. And there's a lot of money that can be thrown out the window at that point. And you might, just throw it on fire and call it a day. If you don't know what's working, what you don't know what's working, right? So part of it is tracking. And there's lots of ways that you can track things along the way, right? Like and this is something simple, like for a service-based business, calls, right? Like how many calls are you converting into clients? Well, how do you know where those calls are coming from unless you set up call tracking, right? Very simple, very easy to do, but a lot of entrepreneurs don't do it. They just, have a phone number out there. But I think what complicates that is the fact that like Google and a lot of these directories all want your NAP to be the same. So it's like, okay, those aren't where you're necessarily going to be measuring traffic from, right? Because those are going to just be common sources. But like, for instance, using CallRail, it's a software that is, that basically creates phone numbers that you can put on advertisements. You can track which ad is working best,
Yeah.
is very important. Something that if you aren't doing, you should be doing, right? Because if you can spend $100 to get $1,000, cool. But if you don't know where that's coming from, if you don't know which ad is making that, because you have 10 ads out there somewhere, then you're just spending money and hoping for the best, right?
Yeah.
It's a spray and pray. So when what does here's the other thing. I think people are scared of money, right? Because a lot of entrepreneurs didn't have a lot of it, right? And starting out, that's fine. And so once they start getting and developing this money, the mindset is, okay, I can finally breathe, right? Right. And that's a legitimate thing. But how do you help curate a mindset that will help their spending?
Yeah, I'm glad you're bringing that up because this is one of the things that I really like to talk about. There's a law out there called Parkinson's law, and it says for every increase in revenue, expenses will meet or exceed that increase within 6 months unless a specific force is put against it. For me, that specific force is a budget and holding you accountable to that budget, right?
Right.
But once you have these specific forces, then we have the habits, because what's really deterring people from their financial goals are their financial habits.
Right.
And your habits, your core beliefs, your values are 50% established by the age of 7.
Oh,
And
wow.
psychology has proven this, including your money. So, when I talk with people, I encourage you to think back to when you were a kid. What was your experience with money? Because it's that experience that is shaping and showing up in how you manage your money today, how you earn it, how you spend it, how you cap your earning potential, your feelings around making too much or too little. All of those play into it. People can sabotage their own financial success because they feel shame around having too much money, so they'll find ways to spend it, and next thing it's all gone.
Right.
And at least being aware of what are my money beliefs based on my experience with it up to this point, and what habits do I need to kind of be aware of and start to change so that my money story isn't the same money story that I'm actually running from.
Right. That's interesting. That's interesting. So part of it is a bit, I mean, not a bit. It's part of it's the psychology of it, right? Like the habits that you've learned, developed over time, and so that's an important part to address. People can change, but it takes effort. It takes acknowledgement first, right? Like you have to look at it and say, okay, my money habits are not what I want, that are not in line with my goals, right? My goals are this. Here are my money habits. The two aren't working. And so you need to adjust your habits to match your goals. But the other thing I guess is that what does it cost, right? Like, I mean, as far as like because I think that's the other thing is they're going to look at you and say, that's going to be expensive, right? And while, we can say that it's an investment, just like investing in your business through forming a business is an investment. And it's a step to keeping bad things from happening. Uh, I'm not cheap, and I'm just gonna throw it out there, like, and there's a reason, because legal stuff is one of the most expensive things you're gonna invest in your business. I would say next is, or close to, if not the same, more than, is your CFO, bookkeeping, that type of thing. What does that run roughly? You don't have to give me an exact number.
Yeah, no, and I believe in flat fees. So like we're flat fees. Some people will do hourly, and it totally varies because if you are a $50,000 a year business, you're going to have a lot less to work with than a $5 million a year business, right? So we've
Right.
got clients whose monthly bookkeeping only runs anywhere from like 500 is our minimum, and I've got people paying over $3,000 a month just for monthly financials to do everything that needs to be done.
Right.
But that's all subjective, right? So
Right.
when you hear how expensive something is, like pay attention to your mind chatter now. So like for all of you out there listening, are you thinking, oh my God, $500 a month and for that? And
Right.
think to yourself, like you get what you pay for. And I guarantee you, if you're paying $150 a month for bookkeeping, you're probably missing out on some quality financial reports. I'm just saying.
Right. Right.
And, like my fractional CFO starts at $3,500 a month. Now, if you're just starting, yeah, that sounds like a lot. But if you're making 3 million a year, that's not a lot at all. So
No.
like check your mindset when you hear these numbers. Like what kind of thoughts are those triggering right now, because again, you can't measure what you can't see.
Right.
And there's a difference. Usually there's a big discrepancy between what you think is happening in your head with the numbers versus when we put it on paper. And
Right.
as an entrepreneur, I think that if we are looking to scale and grow and have our business truly allow us freedom in our lives, we have to be willing to collect and analyze the data. And
Right.
step one is collecting the data. And this is collecting your financial data, which is absolutely an investment.
Right. And the other thing I'd like to just add a little bit to it is you can't improve what you don't measure, right? Like if you don't measure it, how do you improve it? You don't know what your baseline is. You don't know if you're good, bad, not good, not bad. You don't know what you are, right? If you're not looking at that, if you don't address it to begin with, right? Like the first, to kind of like add to AA, right? Like the first acknowledge you have a problem, or in this case, first acknowledge that your numbers aren't where you want them to be, right? That's the first step, or that it's not there. And then next is decide what you're willing to do for that freedom. I'll be honest with you, like hiring a bookkeeper has been challenging for me. And I say that because I've interviewed people, and while they seem nice, I've been burned a lot, right? Like I've been burned from people that, make promises that they can't keep, and then I end up paying for it. And it gets expensive because you have to keep figuring it out. And so I think there's part of that mindset too, is that it's like, how do you find someone that is good, right? Like what are some things that people should look for when they're looking for a bookkeeper and a fractional CFO?
My biggest piece of advice for that is if you can get monthly financials on a consistent basis. Number one, so
Mm-hmm.
often I hear I'm paying a bookkeeper but I don't ever see anything, I don't ever
Right.
hear from them, they don't have any questions. Like a good bookkeeper should be asking questions. Like if you don't know what an AMA is or what an Ask My Accountant is, it is a very specific account that we bookkeepers keep track of to ask you questions, because we don't want to make assumptions that's going to disserve you in your financials.
Right.
Like if your bookkeeper isn't asking questions, and especially if they are not delivering financial reports every month, you may want to reach out to them, right? Like, because
Right.
it now it's a two-way street. So if you have at the same time 10 emails that you haven't responded to that they've been following up with you weekly that's holding financials up, like, own your stuff. Okay. There
Right,
is
right,
accountability to be had. Because I've seen the other end of that too.
right,
But I think getting monthly financials is step number one. Step number two is finding someone that you feel comfortable with being like, hey, Mr. Bookkeeper, Mrs. Accountant, I have a dumb question. I feel dumb for asking it, but I'm going to ask it anyway. And you would be very surprised how often I hear that, even from, I work with a lot of law firms, like, oh my God, this is such a stupid question. I'm like, no, you didn't go to school for this. This is a question, and it is your right to know and understand. It's also your responsibility to know and understand. If you don't
right,
ask, you're doing a disservice to yourself.
right, right. Well, I think, and that's why I love that you're flat fee, because honestly, I am too. Like, I only work in flat fees, and I think it's better for everyone. I know what I'm getting paid. They know what they're paying, and there's very little debate, and it's like, okay, the idea being that, when the traditional relationship is, oh, if I call her, it's going to cost me money, right? Like, that's
Yep.
the hourly mindset. And the problem with that is that inhibits communication, right? Is because then it's like, oh, he's going to charge me if he talks to me. That's why I don't do it, right? Because I want my clients
Exactly.
to talk to me. I want, if I end up with an hour on the phone, I don't want my client to feel like, well, that was a waste of time, right? Because it was an hour on the phone. And so, yes, my flat fees are more expensive than what you would pay at a hourly rate, right? Like, if you're just clocking time, to make up for those differences. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but at the same time, because it's a flat rate, it averages out to make a better relationship, right? That's really what I focus on. Is I would rather have a better relationship with my clients than to maybe make more money hourly. Maybe. But there's only 24 hours in a day. So literally, there's only so many things I can do, right? Like, I can't charge and get paid the way that I want to. What are the biggest mistakes, right? Like, I mean, let's start with the big and go to the small, right? Like, what are the things that you see that are the most detrimental to a business's financial health?
Neglecting it, for sure.
Okay.
Neglecting your finances, neglecting to keep the books, neglecting to put in the work to find somebody who you do feel comfortable with, who can deliver, because that stuff really matters. And having financial visibility, I mean, is huge. You can't. I don't know how else to scale a business without data, including and especially financial data.
Right. Um, so as far as like getting started, like chart of accounts, getting as specific as possible, right? Like, how is there such thing as too specific?
I'm glad you asked that, because yes, there is that healthy balance. Now, at the end of the day, like, your finances have to make sense to you more so than to me. We can
Right.
prepare a tax return with almost any chart of accounts. That's fine. But at one point, it's kind of the difference between effectively managing and micromanaging. You're doing
Right.
yourself, again, a disservice by micromanaging, right?
Right.
And I think that, like, my advice to that would be, start with some general categories, definitely break it out so that you can see your different revenue streams separate and your expense types separate. And pay attention to the questions that you're asking each month. What do these financials leave me wondering?
Right.
Okay, well, I know I'm spending this much on marketing, but exactly how much with each vendor? And okay, I now have 3 employees. How much does the one that I can't charge cost me versus the one that I can bill charge me? Like,
Right.
pay attention to what you're still left asking yourself after having looked at your finances, and then get more detailed from there.
Okay. So I like that. So be as detailed as you need to be, but not so detailed that it turns into a micromanaging situation.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. What are the smallest mistakes? Because here's the thing, I know that small mistakes lead to big problems typically, right? The big mistake, neglect, that's a big problem, right? But that's can be fixed fairly relatively easy, right? You sit down and you do your bookkeeping for a month, and and you can jam through it, and it takes a little bit of time, and it's annoying, but you can do it as a sole proprietor because there's not a ton of transactions. As a smaller business, there's not usually a ton of transactions. I'm not saying there aren't. I'm just saying usually. But what are the small things? What are the small things that get people in trouble?
Um, I would say like the attention to detail things, the things that even if you have a really good bookkeeper and accountant can still fall through the cracks because we're not mind readers and we deal with a lot of transactions. So we can absolutely make mistakes.
Right.
So things like combing through your expense categories to make sure that things are coded correctly. Like if we see a TJ Maxx charge and we put it to office supplies and you're like, nope, that was actually an outfit for my daughter's graduation that was not business related.
Right.
Like we have no way of knowing that, right? We
Right.
see it in a business account, we code it to a business expense. So I would say the kind of like those in the weeds things that we just need help with.
Right. Okay. Makes sense. Um, what like wisdom, right? Like, I mean, because here's the thing: you're not only working for yourself as an entrepreneur, you're also helping entrepreneurs. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk more about your experience starting a business for yourself. What can you share? What are your nuggets of wisdom that you had to learn either the hard way, hopefully not, or the easy way, whichever way you want to go with it?
You know, I've been in business long enough. You know, I think when we all open our doors and we tend to take clients that kind of cost us money even. They're not really profitable. We just want business, we want work, and so we take people that we probably shouldn't have taken. And I think even in working with business owners, one thing that I notice with the people that I absolutely love working with is that they are humble. They know when to exhibit humility. They are a student of being an entrepreneur. They never act like a master, like they know all of the things. And they are very understanding and compassionate people, which makes them good leaders.
Right.
And there's a book, Good to Great, by Jim Collins. I think it is. Yeah, Jim Collins, right there. And the book actually did like a scientific study approach. I love
Mm-hmm.
science. I think I was supposed to be a neuroscientist in another life or something, but it takes a scientific approach to business success
Right.
over time with multiple people, with all of these different variables. And one of the reasons why I love the book is because when they started this experiment, they were like, we are going to not consider leadership because there have been multiple leaders and this business has stood the test of time. So we are not going to consider the persons behind the success. But then they quickly realized that they had no choice but to acknowledge leadership. And
Right.
leadership is not an iron fist. Leadership is servanthood.
Right.
And to have the mindset to know that being an entrepreneur doesn't give you, like, you can't expect, you cannot be entitled, you cannot demand. That is not the qualities of successful businesses that I see.
Right.
I see businesses being successful when they understand how to learn and how to be, how to sit back and just be a student.
Right. I think, and I've read that, or I've actually started that book. I start a lot of books and don't finish them. I'm notorious for that. Like, I love to read, but I am very much I will start something and then never get back to it because I'll have shiny object syndrome when when I'll pick up a book or almost anything. By the way, I at one point wanted to be a neurosurgeon, so I definitely take a more scientific approach to business than perhaps most. And I think that critical thinking skills help you, right? Like there's the creative side, which is great. In fact, I actually struggle with the creative side of things way more than I do the business side of things, like when I'm looking at things. But anyway, so yeah, I can totally tell like neuroscience. But yeah, that book is a great book. I've started reading it, although funny enough, a lot of the companies have now gone out of business that he was discussing in there. Like Circuit City was one of them, where he
Yeah.
talked about that, and it's like, oh, and I think it's more of a cautionary tale for most people. I think the phrase adapt or die applies, right? Like we're in a different world now than we were 10 years ago, than we were 20 years ago. And if you're still trying to fight the same way that you once were, you're going to end up with the rest of the businesses that are doing it the old way. And they're not going to survive. And I think that's going to happen in the legal industry here pretty shortly. There's going to be a lot of old dogs that aren't going to be able to keep up because they don't want to adopt technology. They don't want to adopt new ways of doing things. Now, law tends to be a little slower on the uptick for technology. I mean, heck, we just barely got e-filing not that long ago, relatively speaking. It used to still be all hand file and all via fax if necessary. I mean, and now, yeah, there's e-file, but still some jurisdictions don't have e-file. And so it's like, why are you wasting extra time and lines and people and annoying? And so the legal industry really struggles with this, right? The good old boy network is alive and strong in the legal industry. And I'm not saying that as a compliment. It's very much a detriment, right? Like this new mentality that, that we need to have and evolve shouldn't just be limited to entrepreneurs, right? It shouldn't just be limited to certain, oh, I want a technology company and I'm going to improve and I'm going to be better than Apple, right? Yeah, right. But anyway, but I think, adapt or die, right? Like for a lot of entrepreneurs. And I think you're, talking about the struggle of your finances, right? Part of that adapting is if you can put $100 in and get $1,000 out, great. Put $1,000 in and get $10,000 out, right? I like the analogy as your financial should be more of a vending machine and less of a slot machine, right? Because if it's a vending machine, you're guaranteed you're getting something. It may not be perfect, but something is better than nothing. As opposed to if you're throwing it in a slot machine, maybe not, right? And I think a lot of people run their businesses like a slot machine. They'll throw money at it until it pays off, maybe. Or the next person comes along and takes their payout, one of the two. So your journey as far as an entrepreneur, you started managing money, but then you went out on your own. What prompted that?
A few different things. I was a little kind of backed into a corner out of what I was doing, but I always had this vision because I was vice president at a tax and accounting firm here in town before I went on my own. Mm-hmm. And I always had this vision, even in team meetings, I'd be like, guys, we need to figure out how to work from home. Like there's gotta be a way where we could just all stay at home or only come into the office once a week. And, and so when I left there, I knew I wanted I'm an entrepreneur. I knew that was my calling and I wanted to stay with the money thing because it's very fulfilling for me.
Right.
And so I did it and I started completely remote. So ironic enough, when COVID hit, everybody was trying to figure out how to be remote. And my whole team's like, well, we've been here. Welcome to the club. Like, it's great. Right. So it was, it's just in my blood. My family's full of entrepreneurs. I'm, lucky enough to have my dad to look up to growing up. He's had a couple of different businesses. One he's about to retire from, and my brother's going to take it over. So it's just kind of been in the stars for me.
Nice. Yeah. I think there tends to be two types. Either you've had it in your blood from when you were, born and family members, or you, realize there's more than working the 9 to 5, right? It's, it's hard. And anybody that says it's not is selling something, right? It really is. Being an entrepreneur is not for the faint of heart. I've said that multiple times. I'm sure my listeners are tired of me saying it, but but that doesn't mean that it can't be fulfilling, right? Sometimes, when you're struggling to make payroll or when you're struggling for your next whatever you're trying to do and you feel like the world is just crashing down on you, those are moments where you're just I don't know what I'm going to do. I wish I'd have had that 9 to 5. But then there are other moments where you're like, hey, I just closed 5 new clients this week. I've got this extra cash flow. I've got some room to breathe and I've got some room to exist. Yay, go me. And you feel like you could conquer the world. And so there's certainly a different attitude from a 9 to 5 to, because I've done that too, right? Like I lived the 9 to 5 world, and I found it very largely unfulfilling. It was frustrating because I found that my bosses weren't any smarter than I was, and they were getting paid a lot more than I was. And it got to be the point where I said, no, I should have a seat at the table. I should be able to be the captain of my own fate, and I can do a better job than they can. That isn't true of all of the jobs I've had. I'm not suggesting I'm that. But I'm saying I've had enough of those jobs where you're like, really? How did they get? You're just scratching your head because you're like, no. It's just like so sad. Um, so tell me, like, you have two children. I like people to get to know you, not just as a finance person. Tell me about your children.
Yeah, so I have a 10-year gap between my kids. I have a 14-year-old daughter and a 4-year-old son. My son is a ginger, so like gingerism is a thing. So fellow parents of gingers, I feel you. There should be a support system somewhere for us. If there is and I don't know about it, please let me know. But
Awesome.
I thought I was doing pretty good having a 10-year gap. I'm like, oh, she'll be old enough to where she'll be more of a help. And one day I find myself in the kitchen and my toddler is having a complete meltdown and my teenager is having an emotional breakdown. And I'm like, oh my God, toddlers are the same as teenagers. What did I miss? So
Yeah,
it's a journey, but they're both awesome. And my daughter does track. She's going to state. I'm so proud of her because I was a track junkie in high school too. So it's fun stuff over here.
that's awesome. Yeah, my oldest is 7. My youngest will be 3 at the end of the month. So, and I have 4 right now, and my fifth is due in July. So, we are very very busy at our house. And I
Yep.
know that having children makes. I think it's a little more fulfilling, honestly. And I'm not saying you have to have children to be fulfilled. That isn't my point. But knowing that I'm providing for them in a way and teaching them things about entrepreneurship and teaching them about business and teaching them about these things that my parents didn't. My parents were entrepreneurs. Actually, I would more characterize them as small business owners rather than entrepreneurs, right? Like they weren't
Yep.
looking to expand and find, they were looking to just have business. And so, helping the next generation, right? Like that's one of the reasons why I do this podcast is helping people for because well, it's free and why not, right? Like I mean, to me, I'm trying to share these things with people that will help them grow their businesses, to help them provide for their families, to help them be more successful. Because at the end of the day, there's a lot of people out there that'll sell you something, and it may or may not be beneficial to you. And so the idea being that if you can cut through the fluff, and you can really get what you need, and developing a good plan. And that's really the point of tactical startup is developing a plan, right? Like so many of them just, like I said, fly by the seat of their pants and then wonder why things aren't working or maybe they're not working as well as they could. And if they would take a moment, plan, they could see some real success rather than just maybe success, or maybe they're doing great and that's fine. But what if you could go from great to amazing, right? Like, I mean, that's really what we're talking about here. Just depends on the person, depends on the business and whatnot. Um, so it, I know I started this and I kind of got, imagine I get distracted. No, that never happens. As someone who has ADHD, I do all the time. Tell me about like what's a nugget of wisdom? Like what's the one thing, like if you had to say to pass on to your people, and I consider my listeners and my audience my people, right? Like the people that I work with, my clients, that type of thing. They're my people. What would you share with them that has helped you the most?
Uh, I mentioned like I've been in business for myself for almost 5 years now. And so, like I said, we get into this thing and we kind of just want to get it going. So we'll do whatever, we'll take whatever. But I think that, cause like I'm to the point to where if we don't mesh, if I meet with a prospect and I can just tell that the energy doesn't match or we're probably not going to work effectively together, like know when to say no,
Right.
right? Because just because it's not a good fit doesn't mean that either side is inadequate. It means it's not a good fit. You're not for everybody. Everybody is not for you.
Right.
Abundance mindset, right? And so I think that, just keeping in mind that, look, I didn't go into business for myself to work for myself. I went to design a life and a business that could fulfill me. And, you said like having kids is so fulfilling. Kids will stretch you in ways that you never thought you'd be able to stretch, but then they will fill that space and force you to stretch some more. And I fully believe that being an entrepreneur, you have to be willing to wake up and look in the mirror every morning. It's almost like a kid in that you create and shatter your own glass ceilings and your mental blocks. And if you can look in the mirror and really ask yourself, like, your business is a reflection of you and how
Right.
much you're willing to grow and where your mental blocks are. If something's not happening, guess why? Inevitably, you
Right.
got to be willing to look in the mirror.
I,
And so I think that's like my favorite thing about this business is that it's like my kids. It challenges me in ways I didn't even know. And unless I'm willing to grow, my business is not going to grow.
yeah. So much wisdom there. In fact, I'd like to expand on some of those things. First of all, yeah, sometimes the best money that you never get is the stuff you say no to, right? Because if especially when I've trusted my gut and I say no to something, I'm always happy, right? Like I always feel better because I trusted myself, even if I could have used the money. And there are moments when you're like, oh, I really need the money. But I recognize that I'm not a good fit for somebody. And when I'm not a good fit for somebody, then it's going to be a struggle to help and make them happy, right? And the other part is that, and what I wanted to expand on it or just say was that entrepreneurship will stretch you, just like as you said, kids. And it's important to embrace that, right? Like, don't kick against it. Embrace it. Embrace the magic that is this. You get to do things that, like, one of my favorite parts is if I don't like something, I can change it in a minute, right? Like, if I don't like something, I know I'm repeating myself. I can change it in a minute. I don't have to run it up any flagpole, right? Like, I don't have to ask the people ahead of me or my clients if they'll like this something or not, which, I mean, you should kind of care what your clients think. But like my logo, my website, so many of these other things that you're like, you know what? No, I don't like this. I'm going to change it. Or like, for instance, when I first started out, I started out under one name, and it turned out that there was a scientific principle that beat my name. And so it was screwing me over in the SEO and the website stuff. And so what did I do? I changed my name, right? Not my name, but I changed the name of my company for that reason, because I recognized that if I wasn't going to be able to grow. And so little things like that where you complain about the bureaucracy of a business. The key though is to not set up your own bureaucracy that creates
Yes.
a problem for yourself, right? Like, don't be so inflexible that you create your own problems, right? Like, I mean, we do. I'm not saying we don't, but try not to, right? Like, have that foresight to not to create your own problems. Um, so, a couple of fun questions before we go. I always like to ask fun questions, right? Because we always get kind of a little bit into the serious and important stuff, but at the same time, there's can be a lot of fun in our lives. So the first question is, what is the worst job you've ever had?
That is such an interesting question. And I don't know that I had ever thought about that before you asked, but I would have to say it would be a screen printing workshop that I got a job at here in town. And what made it the worst job is that the girl that trained me had 2 weeks before she was leaving. She gave me 2 weeks and they kind of just let me out to hang. And because I didn't catch on after 2 weeks, they let me go instead of training me and working with me and letting me ask questions. And they were just, it was almost like a closed group. Like the culture wasn't a good fit, right? Like they
Right,
didn't
right.
want to train me. So I would have to say that would be my least favorite job in my past.
Yeah, I did a couple. One was I sold cars, and it's every bit as bad as what the show's name. Oh, it was terrible, absolutely terrible. There was a sexual harassment lawsuit waiting to happen there. It was so bad. It was so disgusting. Guys, I won't even go there, but it was one of my bad ones. Like, it was one of those ones I look back and I was like, if I can survive that, I can survive anything. Because it was so bad. It was so bad. Anyway, and then the other one was I did. Funny enough, I sold in the mall T-shirts at a. It was called T-shirts Plus, and there were two brothers, and again they were dirty old men, and it was so like I could not believe how disgusting they were. And you're like, my heart goes out to the women that have to feel subjected to that, because like you're gross, dude. And I didn't last there long either. I was out. I was like, I'm not putting up with this stuff, and so I left. And I was like, I don't care if I'm burger flipping. It's better than this, right? Like, I mean, working at McDonald's, while everything that isn't great about it is better than having to put up with the filth that goes with that type of crap. Like I said, another lawsuit waiting to happen. Back then it was a very different world. It's like 20, I'm not going to tell you how many years ago, but anyway. um,
And doesn't that just speak to like what I was saying earlier? Like both of our experiences, it was the people, it wasn't the pay. We didn't hate it because we were doing
no,
something and not
yeah,
getting paid enough. It was because of the culture,
yeah.
the people, the leadership, the investing into you as an individual and making you feel valued.
Well, and I absolutely 100%, but I've had companies where they invested in me highly and then they still treated me like crap, right? Like, and so it was kind of this dichotomy, right? I sold ads for Yellow Pages. I've done a lot. Let's just say that I've experienced quite a few things.
I
Construction.
dropped off the Yellow Pages. That was one of my jobs.
I didn't do that. I didn't do that. I did not. I never had a. I almost had a paper route, but it was the Yellow Pages. They sent us to a week long boot camp of advertising and all this other stuff, and then it was such a high pressure sales that if you didn't meet your quotas, it was insane. And I am not a hard sell type of person. I never have been, never will be. It's just not me. I'm a consultative person. I believe that if you have the right information and you want to work with me, that you'll work with me. If you don't want to work with me, fine. I don't want to work with you. And so I don't do high pressure. I never have, never will, because it's like, to me, I feel like that's forcing someone to make a choice about something that they shouldn't have to make a choice about it. But it was so high pressure. I didn't last long. I was having panic and anxiety attacks the first week I got there, even though the boot camp part was absolutely amazing. By far one of the best trainings that I'd ever had. But the environment was so high pressure that I couldn't thrive there, right? And so it's part the company investment, but also part the people and how they treat. It's like, oh, if it's all about the numbers, then it's while you should care about the numbers, it shouldn't be all about the numbers. That's my take. All right. The next thing is, what is the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
One thing that always rings out to me was given to me by one of my really good friends. And she always said, dress for the job you want, not the job you have.
I
And,
like it.
after all of these years and her having said that, it makes so much sense, not just when you take it for what it is, but if you put out what you want, karma's going to come around, the universe is going to come around. And I think the key that I've also learned over the years is put out what you actually want. Like,
Right.
define what it is you are in here for, because your mom and your dad are going to want something, your kids are going to want something, everybody around you wants something for you. But if you don't want something for you, it's not going to manifest near as well, and it's going to
Yeah.
end up falling from beneath you. So, like, dress for the job you want,
Right.
not the one you have, and do it for you.
I like that. I like that. And I think not only is it part of the manifestation, but it's a very different mindset when you're dressed up. And I mean, I'm not saying whatever position it is, right? I'm not saying you have to be in a suit and tie to be successful. Some positions require that, but others don't, right? But there's a very big difference between someone who's in sneakers and shorts and a t-shirt than the person that is in a suit. And I'm not judging either one, but the mindset is different, right? Like, when you're casual with how you are dressed, you tend to be casual with how you treat others. And again, if that's what is appropriate at that time, then great. But if you are trying to, not just impress people, that's not what I'm talking about. It's about what you're doing for your mind, not what you're doing for other people, right? Like you think differently when you're dressed up. Like think of it this way. Superheroes put on a cape, tights and a cape for a reason, right? Because that's when they're using their powers. And so for me, that's more about what it is when you dress appropriately or dress whatever it is that you want to do. So I think that's really wise. Last question. What would be your best day ever?
My best day ever would probably be on a beach with my team at a retreat where we can really focus in on what our purpose is, what our goal. My passion around money is also my team. I really, try to be a good servant type leader, and that's really where I thrive. And even with my clients, to be able to direct them financially. So I would say on a beach somewhere with my team, with my family back at the resort and their families, and we're all just coming together for the good of the cause.
I like it. I like it. That's awesome. Yeah, I think for me, it'd be definitely having a fun day with my family. I know that sometimes is hard, right? Whenever you get multiple people in a area together. Um, Last, if people want to reach out to you and discuss with you further about becoming their CFO or bringing you on for their bookkeeping, how can they find you?
Yep. So I'll give you my website. It is yourcoresolution.com. And all of the links to all of our other social platforms are on there, every way to reach out to us. So that is like the landing place.
Nice, nice. Um, Thank you so much for coming and joining me and sharing your wisdom with my listeners. I sincerely appreciate it.
Yeah,
Hope you have a great day, and we'll talk to you later, okay?
absolutely. Thanks.
Welcome. Well, that was Chelsea, and she is amazing. As I said, I cannot recommend her highly enough. We've spoken many a time, and she is just an outstanding person, an outstanding human being, and she just we've always gotten along. And so, if you're looking at seriously evaluating your finances to make sure that you are on the track that you want to be on, please make sure to reach out to her. And I'm sure she would be happy to help you in discussing how they can do that. If you've gotten value out of this video or this podcast, make sure you're giving me 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or thumbs up on YouTube. I would greatly appreciate it. It helps other people find me. And until next time, make sure to think about your business tactically. Have a great one.